Hey warrior. Monday morning rolls around, and that alarm. It's screaming at you again. Your bed feels like a warm hug you just don't want to leave. That little voice in your head whispers, "Come on, 5 more minutes won't kill you." But while you're negotiating with yourself, across town, someone else hears the exact same sound and they're already up, moving. They're meditating. They're getting a sweat in. They're knocking out their biggest task before the rest of the world has even rubbed the sleep from their eyes. So what's the difference between you and them? It's not talent. It's not luck. And it's definitely not some secret superpower. It's discipline, plain and simple. Here's the raw, unfiltered truth. We're living in a world engineered to keep us soft. Everything, and I mean everything, is screaming instant gratification. Social media. Dopamine hits every few seconds. Food apps. Whatever you're craving shows up in 30 minutes. Streaming. You never have to wait for your favorite show again. We're hooked on easy. But let me tell you something, easy has never built character. And it has never, ever built greatness. Take Marcus Aurelius. The most powerful man in the ancient world. He could have had any pleasure, any indulgence you can think of. But he chose discipline instead. He wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not over outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." For him, this wasn't some abstract idea. It was survival. Running an empire demands a level of mental toughness that only comes from thinking with discipline. The Stoics figured something out that we've completely lost in our modern chaos. Discipline isn't about punishing yourself or living with less. It's about freedom. Plain and simple. Master yourself, and you become unshakable. Get control of your impulses, and you take the reins of your own destiny. Discipline your mind, and you open doors that weak people can't even see exist. But here's the part nobody talks about. It's not about turning into a robot or shutting down your emotions. Real discipline, the kind that actually changes your life. It comes from knowing what you truly want, deep down, and then making sure your actions line up with that. It's about getting so crystal clear on your goals that saying no to distractions just happens naturally, almost without thinking. Think back to the last time you felt genuinely proud of yourself. I'll bet anything it wasn't because you took the easy way out. It was when you pushed through the resistance. When you did what had to be done even though you didn't feel like it. When you picked growth over comfort. That feeling right there. That's the payoff of discipline. And trust me, it beats any instant pleasure you can find. The ancient Stoics created a whole system for building this kind of ironclad discipline. They didn't just talk about it. They lived it. Wars, political chaos, personal heartbreak, they faced it all and still held on to their principles. They came up with practical laws that anyone, no matter their situation, can use. Epictetus, a guy who went from being a slave to one of history's greatest philosophers, taught that no one can hurt you without you letting them. This goes way beyond just emotional toughness. It's about disciplined thinking. Take control of how your mind responds, and you take control of your entire experience of life. Today, I'm going to lay out 10 Stoic laws for you. These are designed to rewire your brain and build serious discipline. This isn't fluffy motivation or feel-good quotes. These are battle-tested principles that have been helping regular people get extraordinary results for over 2,000 years. But you need to hear this loud and clear. Knowing this stuff without actually doing it is useless. You can binge every self-improvement video out there, but if you never apply any of it, nothing changes. These Stoic laws demand practice. They demand patience. And most of all, they demand you get comfortable with being uncomfortable. The person you're going to be in the future is depending on the choices you're making right now. Every single time you pick discipline over impulse, you're building that future version of yourself. Every time you pick comfort over growth, you're letting that future you down. Before we jump into these game-changing laws, drop this in the comments: I choose discipline over comfort, and I am becoming unstoppable. Hit like if you're done feeling stuck. Comment to lock in the discipline you're about to build. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And seriously, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Number 1. The Law of Morning Conquest. Seneca once said, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Your morning. That's your new beginning. And how you start it sets the tone for everything that follows. The first Stoic law is simple but powerful: win your morning, and you win your day. Most people wake up and the first thing they do is grab their phone. They flood their brain with everyone else's drama, opinions, and distractions before they've even had a chance to form a single thought of their own. That's the opposite of discipline. It's giving up control while pretending to stay connected. The Stoics knew the morning was sacred. Marcus Aurelius didn't start his day buried in reports from the far corners of his empire. He started by looking inward, checking his own thoughts and intentions. He got his mind ready for what was coming. He reminded himself what he stood for. Your morning routine is your daily declaration of war on mediocrity. When you wake up and immediately do something hard, whether it's working out, meditating, or jumping straight into your most important task, you're teaching your brain to pick discomfort over ease. You're building what psychologists call your willpower muscle. But here's the catch. Your morning routine has to mean something to you. Just copying someone else's because it worked for them, you're missing the point. The Stoics were all about personal responsibility and knowing yourself. What works for a CEO probably won't work for a student. What works for someone with no kids might not work for a parent. The real power of owning your morning isn't in the specific things you do. It's in the act of keeping your word to yourself. You say you'll wake up at 5 a.m., and you actually do it. You're building trust with yourself. You commit to reading for 20 minutes and you follow through. You're proving to your own subconscious that you're someone who keeps promises. Think about the most disciplined people you've ever met. I guarantee they have a morning routine they almost never break. They've figured out that discipline is a muscle. Use it, it gets stronger. Neglect it, it gets weaker. By starting each day with purpose, they're working that muscle when it's fresh and strong. Morning is also when your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles decisions and impulse control, is at its best. As the day goes on and you make choice after choice, that mental muscle gets tired. That's why it's way easier to eat a healthy breakfast than to resist junk food at 9 p.m. when you're wiped out. But morning conquest isn't just about being productive or getting things done. It's about who you are. When you consistently get up early and tackle hard things, you start to see yourself as someone who does hard things. When you start each day with intention, you see yourself as intentional. Your actions build your identity, and your identity drives your actions. The Stoics believed you become what you repeatedly do. Keep choosing the easy path in the morning, and you become someone who always chooses the easy path. Keep choosing discipline, and you become someone who carries that discipline through the whole day. Your morning routine doesn't have to be complicated or take hours. It just needs to be consistent and just hard enough to require some effort. Maybe it's making your bed the second you get up. Maybe it's 10 push-ups. Maybe it's writing down 3 things you're grateful for. The specific action isn't what matters most. It's the consistency and the intention behind it. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. Some mornings are going to be tough. Some days you'll fail. The disciplined way to handle that isn't to beat yourself up. It's to get right back on track the next day. The Stoics knew setbacks are just part of the journey, not proof that you can't do this. Number 2, the law of emotional ownership. Epictetus, who knew more than his share of suffering as a slave, gave us one of the most freeing truths ever spoken. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That's the second Stoic law. You have to own your emotions completely. Most people go through life as slaves to their feelings. Someone cuts them off in traffic, and their whole day is ruined. A coworker makes a snide comment, and they can't focus for hours. A text doesn't get an instant reply, and they spiral into anxiety. That's not living. That's just reacting. The undisciplined mind thinks emotions just happen to us, like the weather. I can't help being angry, they say. This situation is stressing me out. But the Stoics knew better. They understood that between something happening and your response, there's a gap. A space. And in that space, that's where your power to choose lives. Think about the last time someone really got under your skin. Maybe they criticized your work, forgot something important, or said something hurtful. In that moment, it probably felt like your emotional reaction was automatic, like you had no choice. But here's what was really going on. Your brain took the situation, assigned a meaning to it, and then created an emotion based on that meaning. The key word there is meaning. Two people can have the exact same thing happen and feel completely different. One person gets fired and sees their whole world ending. Another person gets fired and sees it as a chance for something new and better. Same event. Completely different interpretations. That's where discipline comes in. Emotional discipline isn't about stuffing your feelings down or pretending everything's fine. It's about taking responsibility for how you interpret things. It's asking yourself, is this thought helping me? Is this reaction moving me forward? What would the most disciplined version of me do right now? Marcus Aurelius did this every single day. As emperor, he dealt with betrayal, military losses, and personal grief. But he trained himself to find opportunity in every obstacle. He wrote, "It takes very little to make a happy life. It's all within you, in your way of thinking." Putting this law into practice starts with paying attention. Start noticing the gap between what happens and how you feel. When you feel anger bubbling up, stop and ask, what story am I telling myself right now? When anxiety creeps in, check what assumptions you're making about the future. This isn't about becoming numb. Emotions are important signals. They help us navigate. But they should be information, not orders. You can feel frustrated without letting frustration run the show. You can feel sad without letting it ruin your whole day. The Stoics had a powerful exercise for this. They would imagine losing everything they cared about. Not to be morbid, but to practice resilience. They knew that being too attached to things outside your control is a recipe for suffering. When you stop needing specific things to happen to be happy, you become unstoppable. And here's the beautiful part of owning your emotions. When you stop being a victim of how you feel, you discover real emotional freedom. You realize your peace of mind doesn't depend on what other people do, or how the market's doing, or whether everything is perfect. Your inner world becomes your safe place. This takes daily practice. Start small. Next time someone does something that usually annoys you, just pause before you react. Take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself what the most disciplined response would be. You might be surprised how much control you actually have. Remember, you can't control what life throws at you. But you can control what happens inside you. That's not just philosophy. It's practical wisdom that can completely change your life. Drop this below. I own my emotions and I choose my responses. Number 3, the law of present moment mastery. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." That short sentence holds the 3rd Stoic law. Mastering this moment right now is the key to mastering your whole life. Most people live everywhere except the here and now. They're replaying yesterday's screw-ups or worrying about tomorrow's problems. They're scrolling social media, comparing their real life to everyone else's highlight reel. They're physically in one place, but their mind is scattered all over the place. This fractured attention is the enemy of discipline. The undisciplined mind is like a browser with 50 tabs open. It's constantly jumping between thoughts, memories, plans, and distractions. Nothing gets full focus, so nothing gets done well. And it's not just inefficient. It's exhausting. Your brain burns through energy just switching gears constantly, leaving you drained without actually getting anything meaningful done. The Stoics understood that the present moment is the only place where life actually happens. The past is gone. You can't change it. The future isn't here yet, and you can't control it. But right now, this moment, this is where your power is. This is where you make decisions, take action, and actually live. Think about the times you felt most alive, most engaged, most fulfilled. I guarantee you were completely present in those moments. Maybe you were having a deep talk with someone you love. Maybe you were totally absorbed in a creative project. Maybe you were pushing your limits physically. In those moments, there was no past, no future. Just the richness of right now. Psychologists call this flow state. The Stoics knew about it 2,000 years ago. They called it continuous attention to the present. They knew that when you're fully present, you're operating at your peak. Your thinking is clearer. Your emotions are more stable. Your actions are more effective. But present moment mastery isn't just about performing better. It's about finding peace. When you're truly present, anxiety disappears. Anxiety only exists when your mind is projecting into an uncertain future. When you're fully here, regret fades. Regret only exists when your mind is stuck in an unchangeable past. The challenge is that our modern world is built to shred our attention. Notifications never stop. The news cycle demands we care about things we can't control. Social media algorithms are literally designed to grab and hold your focus. Fighting to be present means fighting against billion-dollar industries. But here's what the disciplined person knows. Your attention is the most valuable thing you have. Where you put your attention determines the quality of your life. When you give your attention to the present moment, you're investing in the only moment that actually exists. The Stoics had a simple but powerful practice. They would regularly ask themselves, what's the most important thing I can do right now? Not in an hour. Not tomorrow. Right now. That question cuts through all the mental noise and brings you back to what actually matters in this moment. Another Stoic technique is to fully engage with whatever you're doing. If you're eating, really taste your food. If you're walking, feel your feet hit the ground. If you're listening to someone, give them your complete attention. This isn't just mindfulness. It's a form of discipline that builds your focus. When you master the present moment, you find that life gets richer, more vivid, more meaningful. You stop missing your own life while you're busy thinking about other things. You start to experience what the Stoics called ataraxia, that unshakable calm that comes from being fully present to what is. The present moment is your training ground. Every time you notice your mind wandering and gently bring it back to now, you're doing a rep in the gym of your consciousness. Every time you choose to focus on what's in front of you instead of what's on your phone, you're building your attention muscle. Number 4, the law of obstacle transformation. Marcus Aurelius faced one of history's toughest challenges. The Antonine Plague was tearing through his empire while barbarian tribes attacked from every side. And yet he wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's the 4th Stoic law. Every obstacle is actually an opportunity wearing a disguise. Most people see obstacles as proof they're on the wrong track. They hit resistance and immediately look for an exit. They face a setback and take it as a sign to quit. But the Stoics understood something completely different. Obstacles aren't roadblocks. They're gym equipment. Think about how a muscle grows. It doesn't get stronger from being comfortable. It gets stronger from resistance, from being challenged, from being pushed past its current limits. Your character works exactly the same way. Every difficult situation is a chance to build mental muscle. Every problem is a chance to get better at solving problems. Every setback is a chance to practice bouncing back. The undisciplined mind sees obstacles as personal attacks from the universe. Why does this always happen to me, they ask. Why can't things just be easy? But the disciplined mind sees obstacles as lessons. They ask, what is this situation trying to teach me? How can I use this challenge to get stronger? This isn't about fake positivity or pretending hard things don't hurt. Real problems cause real pain. Loss is loss. Failure is failure. The Stoics weren't denying reality. They were finding ways to get something valuable from every experience, even the painful ones. Epictetus taught that we don't get to choose what happens to us, but we get to choose what we do with what happens. He said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. When you turn obstacles into opportunities, you're not just thinking differently. You're becoming different. Putting this into practice starts with changing how you see things. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "How is this happening for me?" Instead of, "This is terrible," try, "This is training." Instead of, "I can't handle this," say, "This is teaching me how to handle even harder things." And here's where it gets really powerful. When you consistently turn obstacles into opportunities, you start to lose your fear of them. You begin to see challenges as chances to prove to yourself what you're made of. You develop what the Stoics called amor fati, a love of fate. You don't just accept what happens. You embrace it. Think about the entrepreneur who gets turned down by 50 investors before finding the one who believes. Those weren't failures. They were preparation. Each one taught them to sharpen their pitch, strengthen their resolve, and clarify their vision. The obstacle of rejection became the path to success. Think about the athlete who has a career-threatening injury. They could see it as the end. Or they could see it as a chance to build mental toughness, learn new aspects of their sport, and come back stronger and more grateful. The obstacle of injury becomes the path to deeper resilience. Here's the key insight. The obstacle isn't separate from the path. It is the path. Every challenge you face is designed to build exactly what you need for the next level. The person who can handle your dreams is forged in the fire of your obstacles. This law asks for a fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of trying to avoid hard things, you start to see them as valuable training. Instead of seeing problems as proof you're not meant for success, you see them as proof you're being prepared for something bigger. The Stoics believed the universe is rational and everything happens for a reason. Whether you believe that or not, acting as if it's true changes everything. When you treat every obstacle as a teacher, you become an unstoppable student of life. Number 5, the law of voluntary discomfort. Seneca, one of the richest men in Rome, used to practice poverty on purpose. He'd sleep on the floor, eat plain food, wear rough clothes. He wasn't a masochist. He was preparing. He understood the 5th Stoic law. Choosing discomfort on purpose builds strength you don't have to think about when things get hard. Most people spend their whole lives running from discomfort. They want the perfect temperature, delicious food, constant entertainment, effortless work. They've built lives so soft that the smallest inconvenience feels like a crisis. That's not living. That's hiding. The Stoics knew comfort is the enemy of growth. When you only feel good sensations, you get weak. When you only face easy challenges, you get fragile. When you only do what feels good, you become a slave to your feelings. Voluntary discomfort is the cure for this weakness. Think about it. Every single skill you've ever learned required you to be uncomfortable. Learning to read was uncomfortable. Your brain had to work hard to turn symbols into meaning. Learning to drive was uncomfortable. Your nervous system had to coordinate complex movements while processing tons of information. Learning to have hard conversations was uncomfortable. You had to push through anxiety to build that skill. The principle is simple. If you want to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, you have to practice it. If you want to be strong when life gets hard, you have to make life hard on purpose sometimes. If you want to be disciplined when it really counts, you have to practice discipline when it doesn't. Seneca called this premeditatio malorum, pre-thinking about bad things. He'd imagine losing his money, his health, his reputation. Not to be negative, but to be ready. He knew that if he practiced handling difficulties in his mind, he'd be ready to handle them in real life. But voluntary discomfort isn't just mental. It's physical too. The Stoics knew the body and mind are connected. Strengthen your body's ability to handle discomfort, and you strengthen your mind's ability to handle difficulty. That's why they did things like cold exposure, fasting, and physical challenges. Modern science backs this up. Cold exposure boosts norepinephrine, which helps you focus and improves mood. Fasting increases neuroplasticity, which helps you learn and adapt. Physical challenges build mental resilience through something called cross-stressor adaptation. Handling one kind of stress makes you better at handling other kinds. Practically, this means regularly choosing the harder option. Take cold showers. Walk instead of drive when you can. Do workouts that push you. Have the conversations you'd rather avoid. Say no to things you want but don't need. Try fasting. Sleep on the floor sometimes. These aren't punishments. They're training. But here's the important distinction. Voluntary discomfort is not self-punishment. It's self-preparation. You're not trying to suffer. You're trying to become someone who can suffer and still be okay. You're not trying to be miserable. You're trying to become someone who can find peace no matter what's going on around them. The beautiful paradox is that when you regularly choose discomfort, you become more comfortable overall. When you practice handling hard situations, they get easier to handle. When you give up pleasures on purpose, you become less dependent on pleasure for happiness. Epictetus taught that freedom comes from wanting what you already have, not from getting everything you want. Voluntary discomfort breaks the cycle of always wanting more. It shows you that you can be happy with less. It proves that your peace doesn't depend on perfect conditions. This law builds what psychologists call distress tolerance. The ability to get through tough emotions and situations without making them worse. When you can sit with discomfort instead of immediately running from it, you develop a superpower most people never find. Start small. Pick one area to practice voluntary discomfort. Maybe wake up 15 minutes earlier. Maybe do 10 push-ups when you really don't want to. Maybe eat one meal a day that's just fuel, not pleasure. The specific thing matters less than the principle. Regularly choose the harder path. Drop this in the comments. I embrace discomfort and I am becoming unbreakable. Number 6. The Law of Death Reflection. Marcus Aurelius kept a human skull on his desk. Not to be creepy. To remind himself of the most important truth. You could die today. Let that guide what you do, what you say, and what you think. This is the 6th Stoic law. Remembering you're going to die gives life meaning and urgency. Most people live like they have forever. They put off important conversations. They delay chasing their dreams. They waste hours on things that don't matter. They act like death is something that happens to other people, something far in the future, something they don't need to think about. This illusion is the enemy of discipline. The Stoics called this practice memento mori. Remember death. They weren't being depressing or negative. They were being realistic. Death is the only thing in life that's guaranteed. And yet we spend most of our time pretending it's not real. That pretending makes us weak, unfocused, and undisciplined. Think about the last time you got a reminder of your own mortality. Maybe someone you knew died unexpectedly. Maybe you had a health scare. Maybe you saw an accident. In those moments, everything got clear. The petty arguments seemed stupid. The dreams you'd been putting off seemed urgent. The time you'd wasted seemed tragic. Death has a way of cutting through the noise and showing you what really matters. But here's the thing. You don't have to wait for a crisis to get that clarity. You can use death reflection every day to figure out what's important and get rid of what's not. When you remember your time is limited, you get incredibly picky about how you spend it. Steve Jobs, who faced his own death from cancer, said, "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose." That's not just inspiration. It's practical wisdom. When you really get that your time is finite, you stop wasting it on things that don't match what you truly value. The undisciplined person avoids thinking about death because it makes them uncomfortable. But the disciplined person embraces it because it keeps them focused. They ask themselves, if I had 6 months to live, how would I spend them? What would I stop doing? What would I start? Who would I tell I love them? What would I create? What would I give? This isn't about getting obsessed with death. It's about getting obsessed with life. When you remember that every day is a gift, you stop taking them for granted. When you remember that any conversation could be your last with someone, you show up more fully. When you remember your time is limited, you get more intentional. The Stoics understood that fear of death is really fear of not having lived. We're not actually afraid of dying. We're afraid of getting to the end and realizing we wasted our time on things that didn't matter. Death reflection cures this by forcing us to live on purpose. Seneca wrote, Let us examine ourselves and rid ourselves of the faults we have acquired. He practiced reflecting every night, asking himself how he'd spent his day and whether he'd lived up to his values. This wasn't about beating himself up. It was about course-correcting. He knew time was his most valuable resource and he wanted to invest it well. Putting this into practice is simple but powerful. Start each day remembering that this could be your last. Not to create anxiety, but to create urgency around what matters. End each day by asking yourself, if I died tonight, would I be proud of how I spent today? Did I love well? Did I contribute something? Did I waste time on things that don't matter? This practice changes how you approach everything. You get less willing to engage in stupid conflicts because you realize how precious your energy is. You get more willing to take risks because you understand the biggest risk is taking no risks at all. You get more disciplined because you realize discipline is how you honor the gift of life. Death reflection isn't about being morbid. It's about being alive. It's about living each day like it matters because it does. It's about making choices your dying self would be proud of because one day, you will be that dying self. Number 7, the law of negative visualization. Epictetus taught his students a powerful exercise. When you kiss your child goodnight, whisper to yourself, tomorrow you might be dead. This isn't a curse. It's a practice to help you appreciate what you have. This is the 7th Stoic law. Visualizing loss builds gratitude and resilience. Most people think imagining bad things will make them happen or make them miserable. But the Stoics found the opposite. When you mentally practice loss, you get more grateful for what you have and more ready for what might come. This practice, premeditatio malorum, is one of the most powerful tools for building emotional strength. Think about how your brain works. You worry about losing your job, your health, your relationships. But you do it in a useless way. You catastrophize without preparing. You imagine the worst without any plan for handling it. This creates anxiety with no benefit. Negative visualization is structured, purposeful, and incredibly practical. The undisciplined mind either avoids thinking about problems or obsesses over them in a destructive way. The disciplined mind uses negative visualization as a tool for appreciation and preparation. They don't just imagine what could go wrong. They imagine how they'd handle it if it did. Here's how it works. Once a week, spend 10 minutes imagining losing something you value. Maybe your job, your health, your home, someone you love. Don't just think about the loss. Think about how you'd respond. What would you do next? How would you rebuild? What strengths would you use? What would you learn? This practice does two incredible things. First, it makes you appreciate what you have right now. When you imagine losing your ability to walk, you get grateful for every step. When you imagine losing your sight, you get grateful for every sunset. When you imagine losing someone you love, you get grateful for every moment with them. Second, it builds mental resilience. When you've mentally practiced difficult scenarios, you're less likely to be overwhelmed if they actually happen. You've already done the emotional work of processing the loss. You've already made a plan for moving forward. You've already connected with the inner strength you'd need. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." That's what negative visualization teaches you. No matter what happens on the outside, you have the power to choose your response on the inside. The Stoics weren't pessimists. They were realists who chose to be prepared. They understood that suffering doesn't come from what happens to us. It comes from the gap between what we expect and what actually happens. When you regularly practice negative visualization, you close that gap. You get less attached to specific outcomes and more confident in your ability to handle whatever comes. But here's the key. Negative visualization has to be balanced with positive action. You don't just imagine problems. You also imagine solutions. You don't just rehearse loss. You also rehearse bouncing back. You don't just practice being disappointed. You also practice being adaptable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, loss is nothing else but change. And change is nature's delight. He understood that everything in life is temporary. Jobs end. Relationships change. Health problems come. Money comes and goes. The only constant is your ability to adapt and respond. Make this a regular practice. Once a week, pick something you value and spend a few minutes imagining its loss. But don't stop there. Imagine how you'd rebuild, adapt, and find meaning in the new situation. This isn't about expecting the worst. It's about being ready for anything. This practice builds what psychologists call your psychological immune system. The ability to bounce back from hard times. When you've mentally rehearsed challenges, you develop confidence in your ability to handle them. You become anti-fragile. Not just surviving difficulties, but actually growing stronger from them. Number 8, the law of identity transformation. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That's the 8th Stoic law. You have to become the person your goals require, not just chase the goals themselves. Most people go about discipline backwards. They focus on what they want to achieve instead of who they need to become. They want to lose weight but don't become someone who values health. They want to build wealth but don't become someone who makes smart financial choices. They want better relationships but don't become someone who consistently shows up for others. This is why most people fail at discipline. They're trying to act against their identity instead of changing their identity. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you want to be. When you go to the gym, you're voting to be an athlete. When you write, you're voting to be a writer. When you meditate, you're voting to be someone who values inner peace. The Stoics understood that identity isn't fixed. You're not born disciplined or undisciplined. You're not naturally organized or disorganized. You're not inherently successful or unsuccessful. These are all identities you can choose to build through consistent action. Think about the most disciplined person you know. They didn't wake up one day with superhuman willpower. They gradually became someone who values discipline through thousands of small choices. They chose the harder path so many times that choosing the harder path became who they are. Here's the breakthrough. When your actions match your identity, discipline becomes effortless. The person who sees themselves as an athlete doesn't struggle to exercise. Exercise is just what athletes do. The person who sees themselves as a reader doesn't struggle to read. Reading is just what readers do. The person who sees themselves as disciplined doesn't struggle with discipline. Discipline is just who they are. But changing your identity takes more than just deciding to be different. It takes what psychologists call identity-based evidence. You need proof that you are who you say you are. That proof comes from your actions, especially the small, consistent ones that no one else sees. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm and around it the swirling waters are laid to rest." He became that kind of person through daily practice. Every morning he reminded himself of his values. Every evening he reflected on how well he'd lived up to them. Start with a simple question. What kind of person do I want to become? Not what do you want to achieve, but who do you want to be? Do you want to be someone who is disciplined, creative, kind, courageous, healthy, wise? Write it down. Be specific. Then ask yourself, what would this person do in my current situation? If you want to be someone who is disciplined, what would a disciplined person do right now? If you want to be someone who is healthy, what would a healthy person eat for lunch? If you want to be someone who is successful, what would a successful person do with their evening? The key is to start small and be consistent. Don't try to change your whole identity overnight. Pick one small action your ideal self would do regularly and commit to doing it every day. Maybe it's making your bed. Maybe it's reading for 10 minutes. Maybe it's taking a daily walk. The specific action matters less than the consistency. Every time you follow through on this commitment, you're building evidence for your new identity. You're proving to yourself that you're becoming who you want to be. Over time, these small actions add up to massive identity shifts. The Stoics called this ascesis, spiritual exercise. They understood that becoming a better person takes practice, just like becoming a better athlete or musician. You don't just decide to be disciplined. You practice discipline until it becomes part of who you are. And here's what's beautiful about this. It's not about being perfect. It's about direction. Every time you act in line with your ideal self, you're moving closer to that identity. Every time you make a choice your future self would be proud of, you're becoming that future self. Number 9, the law of systems over goals. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." He understood the 9th Stoic law. Real, lasting change comes from building systems, not just chasing goals. Most people are addicted to setting goals. They write down what they want, make detailed plans, and then wonder why they lose motivation after a few weeks. They focus on the destination instead of the journey, the outcome instead of the process, the finish line instead of the daily steps. The problem with goals is they're temporary. You either reach them and feel empty, or you fail and feel defeated. Either way, you end up back where you started. Goals are like trying to clean a messy room by shoving everything in the closet. It looks better for a minute, but the system that created the mess is still there. The Stoics understood that lasting change comes from changing your daily systems, not your yearly goals. A system is a collection of habits, routines, and processes that automatically produce results. When you focus on building better systems, better outcomes become inevitable. Think about it this way. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If you want to lose weight, don't focus on losing 20 pounds. Focus on building a system that includes daily movement, healthy meal prep, and consistent sleep. If you want to write a book, don't focus on having a published book. Focus on building a system that includes daily writing, regular editing, and consistent learning about your craft. The beautiful thing about systems is they work whether you feel motivated or not. Motivation is like the weather. It changes constantly and you can't control it. But systems are like your house. They protect you no matter what's happening outside. When you have a strong system, you make progress even on days you don't feel like it. Marcus Aurelius had a system for daily reflection. Every morning, he'd write in his journal about how he wanted to show up that day. Every evening, he'd review how well he'd lived up to his values. This wasn't about hitting a specific goal. It was about becoming a better person through daily practice. The Stoics called this kaizen, continuous improvement. They understood that small, consistent improvements add up to massive results over time. Improving just 1% every day doesn't feel like much, but over a year it makes you 37 times better. That's the power of systems thinking. Here's how to build a system that works. Start with your desired identity from the last law and ask, what would someone with this identity do every day? If you want to be someone who is physically fit, what would they do daily? Maybe walk 10,000 steps, do some exercise, eat nutritious meals. Those daily actions become your system. But here's the key. Make your system so simple you can't fail. Don't try to exercise for an hour every day. Try to do 1 push-up. Don't try to read for an hour. Try to read 1 page. Don't try to meditate for 30 minutes. Try to take 3 deep breaths. The goal is consistency, not intensity. Seneca practiced this with his wealth. Instead of setting a goal to give away a certain amount of money, he had a system of daily generosity. He'd look for opportunities to help others every single day. This system made him one of history's most generous people, not because he set big goals, but because he had a reliable process. Look at your current systems. What are you doing daily that's moving you toward who you want to become? What are you doing daily that's moving you away? Then design simple systems that support your ideal identity. Remember, goals are about the results you want. Systems are about the processes that deliver those results. Focus on the process, and the results will take care of themselves. Number 10, the law of virtue as the only true good. Marcus Aurelius, who had access to unlimited wealth, power, and pleasure, wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." This is the 10th and final Stoic law. Virtue is the only true good. Everything else is just a preferred indifferent. Most people chase external things, believing they'll bring lasting happiness. They think if they just get the right job, the right partner, the right amount of money, the right recognition, they'll finally be fulfilled. But the Stoics discovered something revolutionary. No external thing can give you lasting peace because external things are outside your complete control. The Stoics identified 4 cardinal virtues that are completely within your control: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These aren't just nice ideas. They're practical tools for living. When you focus on developing these virtues instead of accumulating external stuff, you become unshakable. Wisdom is the ability to see things as they really are, not as you wish they were or fear they might be. It's making good decisions based on truth, not emotion. When you develop wisdom, you stop being manipulated by your circumstances and start responding to them intelligently. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's taking right action despite fear. It's doing what needs to be done even when it's scary, uncomfortable, or unpopular. When you develop courage, you stop being paralyzed by uncertainty and start moving forward regardless of obstacles. Justice is treating others fairly and contributing to the common good. It's recognizing we're all connected and your well-being is tied to everyone else's. When you develop justice, you stop being selfish and start being useful. Temperance is moderation and self-control. It's enjoying pleasures without being enslaved by them and enduring hardships without being destroyed by them. When you develop temperance, you stop being a slave to your impulses and start being the master of your choices. Here's what's beautiful about virtue. It's the only thing that can't be taken from you. Someone can steal your money, but they can't steal your integrity. Someone can damage your reputation, but they can't damage your character. Someone can harm your body, but they can't harm your virtue unless you let them. Epictetus, who lost his physical freedom as a slave, discovered that virtue was the key to inner freedom. He taught, no one can hurt you without your permission. This isn't about being physically invincible. It's about being morally invincible. When your happiness depends on virtue instead of external circumstances, you become truly free. Putting this into practice means making virtue your primary goal. Instead of asking, will this make me rich, ask, will this make me wise? Instead of, will this make me popular, ask, will this make me just? Instead of, will this make me comfortable, ask, will this make me courageous? This doesn't mean you ignore external goals completely. The Stoics weren't against success, wealth, or pleasure. They just understood these things are preferred indifferents. Nice to have, but not necessary for a good life. You can pursue them as long as you don't compromise your virtue to get them. The Stoics had a saying, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. This captures the essence of virtue ethics. When someone treats you poorly, the virtuous response isn't to treat them poorly back. It's to stay true to your principles no matter how others behave. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, loss, and constant challenges. Yet he stayed committed to virtue. He wrote, the best way to avenge yourself is to not be like the one who hurt you. He understood that keeping your virtue in hard times is the ultimate victory. When you make virtue your primary pursuit, everything else becomes secondary. You stop being anxious about outcomes because you know you can handle whatever comes. You stop being jealous of others because you know you have access to the only thing that really matters. You stop being afraid of loss because you know the most valuable thing you have can never be taken. These 10 Stoic laws aren't just ancient philosophy. They're a blueprint for becoming who you're meant to be. They're tools that have helped ordinary people achieve extraordinary discipline for over 2,000 years. But here's the truth. Knowing these laws isn't enough. You have to live them. The Stoics understood that philosophy without practice is worthless. Epictetus said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. These laws only work if you work them. They only transform you if you let them transform you. They only build discipline if you're willing to be disciplined in applying them. Start with one law that speaks to you most. Maybe it's conquering your mornings. Maybe it's owning your emotions. Maybe it's mastering the present moment. Pick one and commit to practicing it for the next 30 days. Don't try to do all 10 at once. That's a recipe for overwhelm and failure. Remember, discipline isn't about being perfect. It's about making progress. You're going to have days when you struggle, when you fail, when you feel like giving up. That's not a sign you're not cut out for this. That's a sign you're human. The disciplined response to failure isn't beating yourself up. It's course-correcting and moving on. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not over outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That's the ultimate message of Stoicism. You are more powerful than you realize. You have the ability to choose your responses, shape your character, and design your life. These laws are just tools to help you access that power. The world needs more disciplined people. It needs people who can stay calm in chaos, make hard decisions, delay gratification for the greater good, and hold their principles under pressure. By building discipline, you're not just improving your own life. You're contributing to a better world. Your future self is counting on what you do today. Every moment you choose discipline over impulse, you're building the person you're meant to become. Every time you apply these Stoic laws, you're investing in a version of yourself that can handle whatever life throws at you. The journey of discipline never ends. But it gets easier. The habits become more natural. The principles become more automatic. The person you're becoming becomes more real with every passing day. If this video inspired you to start your discipline journey, hit that like button. Share your biggest takeaway in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more content to help you become the best version of yourself. Remember, you are capable of more than you know. You are stronger than you feel. You are more disciplined than you think. These Stoic laws are your proof. Drop this final affirmation in the comments. I am disciplined. I am strong. And I am becoming who I'm meant to be.